welcome to this episode of Retinal Realities, brought to you by Roche Products and hosted by Claudette and Karen. Our very special guest today is Melanie, who participated in a trial for a product to address Stargardt's disease and is here to tell us much about that. International Clinical Trials Day is being observed on Monday, the 20th of May. Claudette, please tell us a little more about this.
Well, you know, Karen, everybody knows about clinical trials, especially after the COVID vaccine trials. So clinical trials is a term everybody's very familiar with. But actually testing an intervention for a disease has been done for many centuries. But the first recorded and well-organized study was done by Dr. James Lind, who was a doctor in the British Navy. And sailors on these long journeys, actually, a lot of them died from a disease they called scurvy, and nobody had any idea what caused the disease. And Dr. Lind did a controlled experiment where he took a bunch of sailors, divided them into groups, and he gave them different potions. Some he gave vinegar, and some he gave seawater, and some he gave citrus fruit. And those who had citrus fruit actually did the best, and they were not affected by scurvy. And because that was really controlled, and we discovered that scurvy is actually a deficiency of vitamin C. But the way he detailed it and examined it, we regard that as the first time anybody assessed a treatment with recorded data. And of course, now these clinical trials have become the basis of our Western medicine. And it's a standard way of testing interventions for diseases.
Wow, that is so interesting, and that is 350 years ago. But how are clinical trials conducted today?
Well, today, if you as a researcher have a good idea and you feel you might have discovered an intervention for a particular disease, you will do laboratory tests first of all, and then if you look successful, you go to animal models. And then when you have a really almost a proof of principle in an animal model, you will go to a clinical trial governing authority. In America, of course, it's the FDA. In Europe, it's the European Medicines Association. And you will put forward your hypothesis on what you want to trial and how you want to do it. They will study it. And part of that application to a registering authority is your endpoint. How will you measure if this trial is successful or not? If you are given the go-ahead, you are then normally able to do a phase 1 trial. And a phase 1 trial is a small group of people, and you test it and you look mostly at safety and efficacy. Does the intervention in fact work, and is it safe? Then you go back to the authority and they might approve you for a phase 2 clinical trial, which has more patients. It also perhaps answers questions of dosages. And these trials, phase 1 to phase 2, even phase 3, can last up to 2 years. Again, if your phase 2 is safe and it looks like it has some merit, you are able to go to a phase 3. Now, genetic retinal conditions are quite rare. And for a phase 3, you might need lots more patients. So that's why we hope, and we have proved, that if we have a good cohort of patients, we will be considered for a phase 3, because they have to go to different countries all over the world. And for the MUXistat, the Acusella trial, we were actually one of 30 different institutions around the world recruiting patients, and we were actually the top recruiter. But people with Stargardt's disease, of course, is who the trial was aimed at. And they have a mutation in a gene, most commonly called the ABCA4 gene. There are other genes, but ABCA4 is the most common one that actually causes central vision loss and Stargardt disease. This is a very large gene that produces a protein that is responsible for the metabolism of vitamin A in the retina. Researchers have actually identified over 1,000 different mutations in this large ABCA4 gene. And various combinations of 2 or more of these mutations or errors in the genetic code can cause variations in age of onset, severity, etc., of Stargardt's disease. So it is a very variable disease. But all forms show a build-up of a waste product called lipofuscin in the retina, which is caused by the incorrect metabolism of vitamin A. Vitamin A is metabolized in the retinal pigment epithelium, which is the nurse and factory layer of the retina. And early clinical trials showed that a vision-disrupted drug called emexustat did slow the build-up of this waste product. So phase 1 and 2 trials proved to be very safe and quite promising. So if this phase 3 international trial was organized, and as I said, we were very lucky to be involved in the trial.
That is so interesting and quite a complex pathway until we get to the phase 3 trials. Melanie, you were one of the participants in this trial. Tell us about your experience.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm so grateful to be part of this podcast. I think at first when I got the phone call, it was someone from Retina South Africa that phoned me, since I am a member and I've worked with them quite a bit to get genetically tested and make sure that I have a genetically based diagnosis. And when I got the call, I think there were so many emotions. I think that it goes through you. You're excited. It's almost like a bit of disbelief, like, what is this exactly? And I want to know more. And also a bit of hesitance. I've never been part of any form of clinical trial before. And I didn't know much about what the phases mean and, what is a phase 3 and is that a good thing or is it just the beginning parts of a clinical trial? And I just wanted to find out more, and we were sent all the paperwork. And so my journey started with this clinical trial. I was very grateful to be part of it. I think at first I had to test to see, are you actually one of the suitable candidates? And I think when I made up my mind to, that I want to be part of this, I was so nervous waiting for those first results to say, are you actually allowed to be in this trial or not? Because I really wanted to be. I really wanted to be, not just for the fact that it was great for South Africa to have that trial here, but also because of the promise that it held for patients with Stargardts. And I think from a patient perspective, there's always hope. There's always this hope that you carry in you, and you're waiting for that breakthrough, and you're waiting for that phone call to say, listen, we are busy with something special. We are looking at something that's a possibility or a probability, and your mind just races. I think you think of possibly in future what this means. If this is a success, X, Y, Z is going to happen, or if this works, what does it mean for me and my vision? Does it mean that, it's going to stop deteriorating, which would be great? Is there going to be down the line possibly actually a cure for Stargardt's disease? Maybe my vision could be restored, and, your mind just races. And then as I calmly read through all the documentation and the explanation of what does phase 3 mean and how is it going to work and the duration of the trial and what is expected of us as trial participants, I came to realize that it is fine to have all of these emotions and you're hopeful, but also at this specific moment, it's just important to focus on the trial and what you need to do, everything on a daily basis, the correct things, your tests, your checkups, everything you need to be going through. Just do that for now, and then we'll deal with the rest later, because else it becomes quite an emotional journey. Instead of being, I'm part of medical research history, this could mean a lot, not only for me, but for younger generations of persons who are diagnosed with Stargardt's. And since I was a teen when I was diagnosed, I know, that roller coaster of feelings, and especially at that age, and you have to plan for your future and you want to know, what's going to happen, and no one can really give you answers. So I thought, wow, if this could work, for our young people who are diagnosed, it could be such a great breakthrough. So I went through it. The team was wonderful, I must say. It made all the long trips to the eye hospital and all the tests that you have to go through, which is sometimes, not as comfortable as I would like. Everything, it made it all worth it, because you knew that, if this worked, or even if it didn't, they are working on something. There's something being done. There's something being researched. People are standing at the drawing boards, testing, doing really special things. So, yeah, it was a 2-year trial. 2 years seemed so long at the beginning of the trial, but the months just flew by. And before we knew it, it was all over. And we're just waiting anxiously for those results to come through.
Can I ask, Melody, do you know, were you on the drug arm or the placebo arm? Did you know?
I was on the placebo. That we were told after the trial had finished and after the results were made public, the research team did communicate with us. So yeah, that was also interesting because you just never knew. You were either drinking the real stuff or you were having Smarties. So you just weren't sure. But you did it because you felt that you were part of something bigger than yourself. Never mind what it was. Obviously, afterwards, then there was still other thoughts and emotions and things to go through.
That was really quite an experience in every single way. And when you heard that the trial had not met its endpoint, how do you feel now about that?
I think now it's been a couple of years since the trial ended. I think to just go back to that day when we were waiting for the email and they said it would take a couple of months, but every now and then you check and see if there's any communication. And kind of eventually with time, it's almost like it faded. The months went by again and it's like, oh, I was part of the trial. Oh, but you go on with life. And then when the email came through, I was like almost nervous to open it. I wasn't sure if I wanted to know. Did I want to know that might have not had the results that they were hoping for? And if it does, what's happening next? What's going to happen next? Or what does that mean for patients living with Stargardt's disease? So opened the email. Unfortunately, the results weren't as expected. In that moment, I was obviously feeling disappointed. I was back at that time when I got my diagnosis. I think all of that, the anxiety, oh no, what am I going to do now? What is going to happen with my vision now in the next 15, 20, 25 years? Because it's very slow progressing, but you do notice the changes. So at that specific moment, I was like, oh, sad. I was sad. I was disappointed. But I thought, okay, but it was such a great experience. And also just the fact that there was a trial. I kept telling myself, just the fact that there was a trial and they came so far with the trial phases, and that we in South Africa, we were part of such an amazing moment in history for this specific retinal disease. It was still great, and I think it was still great to be part of it. And that's why it's so important to, I think, empower yourself with knowledge and network with people and organizations who work in that field. So yeah, now it's just, I guess, back to the drawing boards, and at least knowing that researchers are working tirelessly to try and find some kind of breakthrough. I think that was, I guess, a form of, okay, at least I can find peace or a bit of peace of mind, knowing that they're not just going to give up. There's something that's going to be there in future, something else to be part of, something else to look forward to. And for now, we just, carry on.
Yeah. Exactly. And we believe this may not be the end of MEXustat. Claudette, what are the newer developments after that?
Well, the trial was to be judged by the size of the lesions. And overall, when they averaged them out, the difference between those on the placebo and those on the drug was not substantial enough to justify the therapy actually going forward. But when they examined the results in younger patients who were on the trial, and this is, remember, internationally, younger patients showed that better endpoints had been achieved. In other words, the younger the patient, the smaller the lesion size, the more the drug seemed to be able to control that. There is a movement now that we're going to be supporting, probably in Japan. They are trying to get the authorities there to re-examine that younger cohort of patients and possibly perhaps put it out or let it go through to a registration for a certain group of patients. So we will support all international requests for re-evaluation of the results. And, worldwide, there is this move that patient-reported outcomes measures are not to be ignored because the patients do know. And as Melanie, somebody said, well, you didn't actually know if you were on the placebo or not. But some people who were on the trial had reports that they did feel they had an improvement in vision. So we will support international requests for a re-evaluation of results if it merits it. But there are many other clinical trials underway for Stargardt's disease. Some of them are genetic, some are stem cells. Some are looking at replacing the function of the retina by bringing the light sensitivity to the neural part of the retina. And there are also trials for many other retinal conditions. And we feel that safe, registered treatments are truly imminent.
Yes, that's very encouraging, Claudette. And with so many trials looming that could bring promising treatments for a wide variety of retinal conditions that include macular degeneration, Stargardt, retinitis pigmentosa, Usher's, and a host of other retinal conditions, what should anybody with a retinal condition actually do?
Well, they first of all, and we've had it from the horse's mouth, Melanie, as it was, they need to join Retina South Africa for advice, information, counseling, and support. And many of these treatments will be gene-specific, so that people will need to have a genetic result. And Retina South Africa can facilitate a genetic diagnosis for them. So anybody who would be interested can contact us via our website, which is www.retinasa.org.za.
And then finally, Melanie, as a trial participant, I'm sure you have advice for young people with retinal vision loss.
Yes, I just want to say that you are not alone. I know that when you receive that diagnosis, especially when you are a young teen or maybe in your early 20s, it can feel very overwhelming and also isolating, because it really does feel like you are the only person now out there struggling with this, or you are the only one that has been told, listen, you know, your vision is going to deteriorate and XYZ is going to possibly happen, and this is what you should do. And I think in a lot of cases, well, in my personal experience, even though they meant well, my loving family and friends and everyone wanted to, give me comfort and say, no, it's going to all be okay. And it is going to be okay. It will be. And that's what I want to tell young people. It will be okay eventually. But it's okay to go through those first phases of, can't believe this is happening to me, why, and all the questions. But I want to encourage you to then reach out to someone to talk to. It could be, your ophthalmologist. It could be someone else in a support group that has Stargardt's disease, that might have, also been living with a retinal disease for a while. Maybe they are a bit older and they've been through, all the ups and downs of life and kind of found their way and tried to settle somewhere and find employment and all of that. So I think that's what I found really helpful, is to connect with these organizations, Retina South Africa, the Low Vision Center, support groups, on social media, there's support groups for different retinal diseases. So you can hear what other people's been experiencing and how they have worked through things, and things like, how do they use technology to help them? How do they use visual aids to help them in their daily life? Because it can seem like a lot, but if you find the right group of support, they can give you such great advice and point you in the right direction. And then you actually see that there is things that can help me. There are things out there. I don't have to feel so alone and isolated. And definitely, I want to just confirm what Claudette and Karen said, is to register with Retina South Africa. I think if it wasn't for that, I would have never not only not known about the clinical trial, I might not have been considered, because at that stage, they helped me through getting my genetic diagnoses, getting a proper checkup from my ophthalmologist, recommending ophthalmologists and people who I can go and see. And the network of people out there to support you is really vast and great. So use those opportunities. Don't isolate yourself. Just ask for help.
Oh, thank you so much, Melanie, for sharing not only your experiences, but also for that wonderful advice. And thank you again to our sponsors, Roche Products. And please remember to subscribe to this series by clicking on the subscribe button just on this page. This will help to keep this very popular series going. Thank you.